as someone who has both asked for pay rises and been on the receiving end, the conversation usually starts too late. There are a lot of managers who are like, oh, this person's underperforming, that person's underperforming. Maybe you're undermanaging.
Hey, Abadesi. I have a couple questions.
Yo, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Techish podcast, your favorite podcast, I'm sure. I'm Abadesi, the founder and CEO of Hustle Crew. And I usually have my extraordinary co-host, Michael, founder and CEO of Pocket and Pocket Jobs, People of Color in Tech, but he's on vacation. And so you will have me for the next 20 minutes or so for a very special community Q&A episode. Let's go. So today's episode is me sharing some careers advice for folks who are navigating career transitions, promotions, pay rises, and also for founders. And of course, if you are a Patreon subscriber, you will have some extra bonus content that I'll be jumping into at the end. But yeah, let's start with some of the careers questions. So one of the questions that I got asked recently is, how do I prioritize my own growth in the company that I'm at when I don't have structural support? So I don't have a manager, I don't even have a team leader, but I really want to make sure that my career keeps progressing and growing. Ooh, this is a hard one. And I can relate. A lot of my career was in startups where we didn't really have formal structures. We didn't have proper HR teams. As time goes on, it's really important for you to feel like the time that you're spending at work is growing into something fruitful. It's leading you towards bigger things, whether that's more clout in your industry, more authority as a leader in your industry, more expertise, or at the most basic level, money, getting pay rises or promotions. So I think if you are someone who's in a role where your larger team or organization lacks the structure to help you develop, then you're going to have to look further afield to make sure that you are still growing and developing and learning. So what industry are you in? Is that tech? Is that specifically music tech, deep tech, AI, machine learning, whatever it might be, creative industries? Is there a way for you to find community outside of your company where you can keep growing and learning from your peers? Here in London, for example, there's this amazing community called Creative Mornings. They do pre-work meetups, breakfast meetups. They put a lot of content out online. You can watch all their talks on YouTube, including a talk I did for them all about promoting diversity in the tech industry. But I can think of so many other events and communities. If you are a woman in tech, there's some really cool communities here in London, like She Bites Back. But, if you're a woman in the creative industry, there are really cool things like Babes on Waves. If you're not a woman and you're just a person, you're looking for really cool things, go on Eventbrite, go on Meetup, go on Luma, Luma, and see what events are happening for people that work in your industry and see what you can go to, what you can check out. And when you go to these events, look at the people who are where you want to be, right? The people who are a few steps ahead of you, a few years ahead of you, and see what you can learn from them. How did they go from being junior to mid-level? How did they go from being mid-level to senior? How did they go from being senior to the C-suite or the board? Whether those are the people who are speaking or just the people that you meet, I think there's a lot that you can learn from their career progression and their career development to put into practice. Everyone's building a career based on their terms, their desires, their priorities. So what some people have done won't necessarily work for you or resonate for you. But what you can do is just cherry pick, right? It's like a pick and mix, like find the bits that make sense for you and feel relevant and leave the things that don't. Another thing that you might want to explore doing, budget permitting, is investing in a coach. If you are someone who has the luxury of disposable income and you're really serious about prioritizing your career growth, but you don't have that support from your line manager or from your team, then get a coach, and it doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. It could be 1, 2, 3 sessions where you have a very clear intention of, I'm feeling stuck. I feel like I'm stagnating. I want a clear game plan that helps me feel like I am moving forward in my career. I'm making progress. And for you, a career might look more like a portfolio than like a clear path up the ladder. It might be that there are other skills that you want to develop, other lines of curiosity that you want to explore. So what could be helpful to do with a coach is actually design that portfolio career and actually try and identify what are the things that really matter to me, what are the things I want to do more of, what could that look like, and then maybe creating something that holds you accountable, whether it's a 6-month plan, a 12-month plan, a little series of goals. if you can't afford a coach and you are open to using generative AI, why don't you get ChatGPT or any of the other generative AI tools to be your career coach? You can literally give it a prompt like, update your memory to talk to me like a careers coach, and then say, I'm starting to feel stuck in my career. I'm starting to feel like I don't have support. I want a clear 6 to 12 month strategy that feels sustainable and actionable, that helps me get from A to B, and tweak it. If you don't like that first answer, go, I want this to be more focused on building my technical skills, or I want this to be more focused on building my career outside of my current role. I want this to be focused on creating more avenues and more opportunities for me. And you see what it comes up with. And if you want something really specific, say, I want weekly goals and monthly targets so that I can feel like I'm making measurable progress. You'd be surprised what you could come up with. You could even use generative AI to suggest some of these communities and meetups for you to check. So yeah, hopefully I've given you some ideas for how to prioritize your own growth without structure and support or a team manager. If not, hit us up on social media at TechishPod, or send us an email. Happy to follow up in due course, or subscribe to Patreon, where you might get your follow-up question answered in the exclusive bonus content that comes at the end. But for now, let's move on to the next question. Here's a really good one that we get asked all the time. How do I position myself for a pay rise? Now, my theory on this, as someone who has both asked for pay rises and been on the receiving end of pay rise and promotion conversations, is that the conversation usually starts too late. And I know you're not going to like the answer to that, because you're like, oh my gosh, it's my performance review tomorrow. Why are you telling me this now? But the truth is, by the time we start planning that conversation for a pay rise or a promotion, it's probably already too late. You really should be laying the groundwork for a conversation about increased compensation, responsibility, pay, long before your 1-year anniversary, 2-year anniversary, annual performance review. And the reason for that is that you should be signposting how you are growing in the role all the time. And you should be drawing attention, calling attention to your achievements, your value add, all the time, regular intervals. I'm not saying that you need to be that person that's like, look what I did. But at least on a monthly basis, you should be recapping with your manager, with your boss, hey, here are all the cool things that I did. And also, here's all the feedback that you've given me that I've taken action on. So yeah, I really think if you want to seriously position yourself for more pay, more responsibility, more opportunities, whatever that looks like, you have to be putting yourself in the mindset of the budget holder. Who is that person that has to say yes to that? And that's going to be your manager. That's going to be your manager's manager. And you have to make sure that it's easy for them to say yes, because the evidence of your achievement, of your value, is so obvious. It's so plain and simple. If you're in a sales role, you want to be calling attention to the deals that you've closed. If you're in an operational role, you want to be drawing attention to the efficiencies that you've driven, to the money that you have helped the business save. If you're in a customer success role, you want to draw attention to the number of queries and cases that you have resolved, within the time frame that's expected, maybe even faster than that. Show the volume of your work. The more you can quantify, the better. If you have testimonials, quotes, any kind of reviews from stakeholders that you interact with, it could be people within the company, it could be customers outside the company, clients, whatever it is, you should be screenshotting that stuff, forwarding it on to your manager, like keeping it in a folder and saying like, oh my God, here are all these cool people that love me and value our company and our business because of me. So yeah, I think building that case for why you are so valuable and important and therefore undervalued and underpaid as far as your salary is really, really key. And I think it's also really important, like any negotiation, to be mindful of what stands between you and your desired outcome, right? So understand the landscape. Like if your company has just done loads of restructuring, loads of layoffs, that's probably going to shape how you time this conversation and what you ask for. And be creative. A lot of times we just want more money, and I get it. Inflation is real. Bills are real. But what else could you ask for that would feel meaningful to you that isn't literally cash, right? Is there a training that you could have the company invest in for you? Is there greater flexibility that you could push for that would increase your standard of life? Is there a travel opportunity or a conference or an industry event that you would like to go to that the company could pay for? Be creative, especially in this economy where not just tech, so many industries are in year 2, 3, 4 of cutbacks, cutbacks, cutbacks. If you are serious about getting more from the company, then you have to be creative in terms of how you approach that conversation. And even if it's a no, just say, okay, it's a no for now. Like, at what stage can we pick this conversation up again? And if there's any feedback to action as to why that's a no, you're not ready for promotion yet because I need to see you demonstrate this skill or that skill. Create a plan and say, okay, like, what would evidence for me demonstrating that look like? And if it might be, I want to see you close this kind of deal, I want to see you solve that kind of problem, I want to see you support this kind of teammate, then you can say, okay, cool, well, I'd like to catch up with you in a few months' time and share an example of how I've done that. So yeah, don't be disheartened if the conversation doesn't go your way, but also make sure that you are always building the case for that pay rise by demonstrating your value, demonstrating your wins, and showing how you are taking feedback on board and building on that. No one's perfect, right? Like, literally no one's perfect. You're working in a team. Your team is full of individuals. All those individuals have different demands and different needs. So it's on you to constantly adapt and react to all the different individuals in your team and to your manager, right? And make sure that you are evolving and adding value so that you can push for more money. So good luck. Keep us posted. What are your favorite pay negotiation tactics? If you want to share any, tag us on Techish Pod. I'm always looking for negotiation hacks, tips, tricks, scripts, good lines. Before I move on from this topic, one thing that I'll say is, if you are in the position of actually starting something new, maybe like a new job, or like you're a freelancer or a business owner and you've got a new client, one of the things I really learned the hard way was, to always start high and be negotiated down. I'll never forget the time that I was interviewed for a job that a friend referred me for under a creative agency, having only ever worked in like startups for the last few years before that. And with startups, kind of having this expectation of like a low salary because I was getting paid in equity as well. And I go to this creative agency, and in my mind, I was literally like, oh my God, I'm going to add like 20K to my salary now and see what they say. And I like put out my salary expectation, and he was literally like, yeah, cool, great, when can you start? And I just kicked myself because I was like, gosh damn it, that was too low. The way that guy said yes, the speed with which he said yes, he was just like, yeah, sure, awesome, great. I was like, damn it, there was more on the table, wasn't there? And I feel like, similar to that, one of the things I always say to people is, when you say the number that you want, stay silent. Don't fill that awkward silence with, a negotiation against yourself where you're like, or maybe this, or maybe that. If you have landed on a number that you feel represents your value, your worth, and you throw it out there, have the confidence to leave it there. Let the minutes go by, let the seconds go by. The worst thing you can do after putting a number out there is start negotiating against yourself. And I have just seen people do this so many times. What's your rate? This? Okay. Or that. It's like, no, just stick with your number. Let the other side of the table think about it, think on it, but do not make that mistake of negotiating against yourself. That is not good. Not good. And I've done it. Sometimes we have to learn this the hard way.
Yo, this episode is brought to you by Cozy Earth. Now that I'm real grown, people ask me where am I at? I tell them I am at home enjoying my rent and my mortgage. I'm at home enjoying my house. It is now my sanctuary. So shout out to Cozy Earth. I've invested in new bedding, new PJs. I'm comfortable. With their bed sheets, I'm sleeping better. I'm waking up refreshed. The pajamas and loungewear is unreal. They got men's, they got women's. I've been splurging. So if you haven't upgraded yet, you're missing out on cooler sleep, everyday luxury, and that sanctuary vibe. And not only that, you get a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty on all bedding. If you head to CozyEarth.com right now and use the code Techish, you get 40% off all the best-selling sheets, pajamas, and more. Treat yourself and invest in your home sanctuary.
Okay, so my next question is actually more from a manager's perspective. A manager has asked, how do I bring up conversations about underperformance for someone who tends to avoid confrontational situations? We've all been there. There's someone where it's like, gotta have a difficult conversation, gotta have a constructive conversation with you, but I know you're going to avoid it, or I know you're going to get defensive, or I know it's going to be really hard to do that. How do you bring it up? What do you do? So again, it is obviously completely dependent on the kind of team that you have and the bandwidth that you have. But I personally think an ideal situation for every manager and their managees, direct reports, whatever you want to call them, is to have clarity on how you like to give and receive feedback. It is a very simple question. We're all out here asking each other, what are our love languages? What are our star signs? This, that, and the other. But we are not asking each other, how do you like to give and receive feedback? And it's such an important question, because the way that I react and respond and engage with your feedback is completely dependent to how it is delivered to me. If it's delivered to me in a way where I can like truly accept it and hold it and process it and, act on it, that's all the world of difference to delivering it to me in a way which immediately makes me defensive, makes me distrustful of you. Just as an example, there have been times where a manager has asked me to share feedback on them. And then I've said something, and then they've immediately punished me for doing that, like gotten really defensive, made life really difficult for me, made me feel bad for saying it. And I was like, okay, well, now I really wish I didn't say that. I wish I just lied. Like, no, I have nothing constructive to say at all. You are perfect. So yeah, I think feedback is something that's truly needed and important, but at the same time can cause serious rifts and trust issues. And, when it's not done well, it just like creates hostility and conflict. So we want to avoid that. So yeah, if you want to have a conversation with someone where you talk about their performance, you talk about the areas of development that you've observed, you talk about, I don't know, any negative patterns or habits that you've perceived, I think it's really important before you even get into that to just understand how someone likes to give and receive feedback. Because for some people, they might need a bit of time to process and prepare, before you come to them. And I'm not even talking about like neurodivergence. I'm just talking about like personality types. For some people, it might be a case of doing it in the moment. Just tell me as soon as it happens, so that I can immediately in that moment be aware of what I'm doing and be mindful of it. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique. For me, you don't want to give me feedback on an empty stomach. To be honest, you don't want to do any interaction with me on an empty stomach, because I will react from a place of anger, and that's not pretty for anyone. But yeah, I would say understand how this person likes to receive feedback and follow that protocol. I would also say that you need to role model that behavior. If you're a manager that is in the position of giving constructive feedback, you also need to invite constructive feedback, and then you need to receive that really well. Because there are a lot of managers who are like, oh, this person's underperforming, that person's underperforming. Maybe you're undermanaging. I said it, like one of the first things I learned when I became a manager at Groupon back in the day was you don't manage a team, you manage individuals. So what works for Michael isn't going to work for Simon. What works for Janelle isn't going to work for Jamelia. I need to understand each person's needs and how I can support them and what I can do for them. So if you want someone to receive your constructive feedback well, you need to also constantly be inviting constructive feedback into your realm. And then you need to show your team how you're acting on it. Like, hey, everyone, I've been getting a lot of feedback that I'm not leaving enough time in the team meeting for reflections from the wider group about the choices I'm making. Going forward, I'm going to set a timer and make sure that there's always 15 minutes left at the end for everyone else to just chime in and discuss. So that's a way that I'm going to like hold myself accountable and make sure we leave, enough space there, because the last few times I've only left a few minutes or it hasn't even happened at all. So I'm taking that on board. You need to demonstrate that, and you need to show that you can listen to feedback. And look, defensiveness is very natural. Like, hey, I don't like the way you did that. Well, I don't like the way you did this. Like, we have fragile egos, all of us. So, well, not all of us, but most of us. There's probably like a Buddhist monk listening who's like, ego, what ego? Actually, I would love it if there was a Buddhist monk listening to Techish. If that's you, please write to us and let me know, because we should be interviewing you so you can teach us all your wise ways. But yeah, back to the topic. Defensiveness is something that we're all familiar with, but it is not the right response to feedback. If someone gives you feedback and then you get defensive, it sends a message that you don't really want to receive feedback, and you might never ever get feedback again, which is so sad. But yeah, final thing I'll say on feedback is that if you are someone who has received feedback from someone on your team, respect the privacy and sensitivity of that. Because I've been in situations where I've said things and then that's gone all the way around the team and then come back to me. And I'm just like, wait, what? That's not even what I meant. That's not even what I said. So I think it's really important that we don't weaponize feedback. I think it's really important that we respect feedback that's shared, especially if it's like based on a like frustration or challenge that someone is dealing with, because none of us want to feel like judged or excluded as a consequence of what we shared. So good luck. Wishing you all the best. And now we've got a question from a long-time listener, first-time caller. Here we go.
Hey, Abadesi. This is Anthony Ware from Aware Catalyst. Thank you so much again for the Streamlining Operations and Systems Masterclass. I have a couple questions. How often do you update your SOPs? I know you shared some during the session. Do you schedule time every quarter, every year to do those updates or at least reviews? Two more questions. How much do you involve your team on the revisions? And how has that kind of transformed over time when it comes to your team? And then the last question, I think it's kind of most important, is thinking, do you make the SOPs align with your life goals? Like I know some of the things you share on social about the things you do and how you are living your life. And I don't want to use the word balance, but just how you live your life. And because it's your company, do you try to make those SOPs align with your life and how you like to work and those kinds of things? So thank you so much. Hope you're having a great day. Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Anthony, for your question. And Anthony was referring to a masterclass that I did online, which you can catch on the Hustle Crew YouTube at Hustle Crew Live, all about how to streamline processes and operations as a founder. So the SOPs being, standard operating procedures, processes. I actually showed a screenshot of Hustle Crew's process guide, which we've built out on Notion. And if you are a founder who doesn't have this, I have just given you a gift. Like, you need to build a process guide, a process manual, whatever you want to call it. But it's basically like a directory of SOPs, operational processes, whatever you want to call them. That is almost like a recipe book or a manual for everything that you need to do to run your business. So in the Hustle Crew process guide, we have, this is how you write a sales outbound email. This is how you write a sales proposal, 1 2 3 4 5 6. This is how you go onto an introductory call in sales, like with the script, with like prompts, with like links to our CRM system where you take all the notes. We have it for operations. This is how you create an invoice in our accounting software. This is the email template that you use to send it. So we literally have for every single stage in the customer journey, but also just in the essential operations of the business, accounting, social media, marketing, you name it. We have all the recipes, all the instructions, whatever you want to call it, that help us run the business. And the idea behind that is, if God forbid something happens to me, someone could just step in, take over, and it would be smooth and hitch free. So what Anthony is asking is, how often do I review those things? Is that something that's scheduled? Do I involve my team in those things? And I guess, to what extent is it important for me to align those processes with the way I want to live my life? So I'll just start with, how often do I review it? At the moment, annually has been enough because our business doesn't change rapidly enough. I'm sure if we were like a venture-backed startup or just in a rapidly changing industry, we would probably have to do that on a shorter cadence. But because we offer education to companies and individuals, just individuals, yearly works pretty well. And 100% the team is involved in that. If you actually were to look at our guide, it's divided by department. So there's like the sales section, there's the actual like training development section, there is the accounting and finance section, there's the social media section, legal and operations section. And so, one of the big things we try to do again on a yearly basis is these end of year reflections. And it's almost like a retrospective for the whole year. Like, what were the things that went well? What were the things that didn't go well? We also talk about those outlier cases, like who was that really difficult client or that really difficult project where everything went wrong? And we look at where the process has failed us. Like 99% of the time, we followed every process correctly, but there'll be that 1% where we didn't follow the process correctly, or where the process was not fit for the problem. And that's where we have an opportunity to innovate, adapt, and develop. So these end of year reflections are a really great opportunity for us to do that. And it usually starts with a written exercise. So we have the prompts and we write them down. And then before we meet IRL, we can read everyone's thoughts and then use the time together to actually decide which processes are no longer fit for purpose or do not cover us for this outlier situation or this risk that we've identified, and then we adapt it. And just to give you a really specific example of how this might look, we have like standard terms and conditions that all of our clients sign, and most of them are pertaining to payment terms and scheduling terms and stuff like that around our training. But we had one particular client where the tone of the language started to become really hostile. I was genuinely afraid to open these emails. I was getting my husband to open the emails, read them, and then relay the message to me. And this was like a huge issue across the team just because the tone was just so aggressive and hostile. And so what we decided to do was introduce into our terms and conditions that everyone signs an anti-harassment and anti-bullying and sort of like code of conduct policy, because we felt that if we had had that in place with this really difficult client, we could have pointed to that in the interactions and then said, hey, you're violating this thing that you agreed to. And as per, term C in this list, we are now terminating our contract with you, but because we didn't have that, it was just like a lot harder to have that conversation. I mean, we did terminate our contract with them, but we felt like we had to justify it in all of these really awkward conversations. And then I had to have it was not fun. So that's one of the ways that our process has changed. And in a way, I guess that kind of answers your final question, Anthony, which was, how do you make sure that these operational processes align with the life that you want to live? Look, money is important. I'm not going to pretend it's not. I'm speaking from an incredibly privileged position as someone who has had, senior leadership positions in corporate in London that pay very well in the tech industry, who has had equity, realized from previous roles in big tech like Amazon, who also has run a really successful company, and I make money on the side as a public speaker, etc. I'm not saying this to show off. I'm just like saying this to like acknowledge the fact that I am in a privileged position to build a business that feels sustainable to me. And that's also because, as you all know, if you have been listening to the show or you follow me on social media, I have faced burnout. And when you are at that emotional and physical rock bottom, some part of your soul says, I never want to be here again. If I can choose to avoid this, I will. And part of my way of avoiding going back to that dark, low place is to ensure that my business works for me and the way that I want to work. And that sometimes means I'm not making as much money as I would like to make. But that comes back to the privileged position where it's like, that's what my savings are for. Or, that's what cutting back is for. Let's be real. Like, it is not sunshine and rainbows in the land of DEI training and consultancy right now. It's May 2025, and people are out for us. People in very powerful positions like presidencies are out for us. So yeah, I probably could change my operational processes and ultimately my values and what I stand for to make more money. But life in many ways is short, and I just want to spend the time that I'm on this planet working with people who are not mean to me and who respect me. My bar is not that high, y'all. It's really, really not. But, I've learned the hard way that no amount of money is worth your dignity. I'll just leave it at that, shall I? Nice little mic drop moment there. So hopefully you've enjoyed the shower of sound bites I have just rained upon you in the absence of Michael. Next week, we have a very special guest host. I'm not going to reveal who yet, because I like to build suspense for the regular listeners. But yeah, if you are subscribed to the Patreon, stay tuned, because I am coming to you with your extra special bonus content. But in the meantime, thanks for listening. Check us out on YouTube if you weren't watching this, because you are missing my facial expressions and extremely exciting eyebrow movements. Otherwise, yeah, keep following us at Techish Pod. Send your emails to techishpod@gmail.com or DM us your questions. And I will see you soon, everyone. Have a good day. Okay, here we go with the bonus Patreon content. Whoop, whoop. So we have a question from Caroline.
To watch the full episode, subscribe at patreon.com/techish. You'll get access to all full-length episodes, no adverts, the chance to submit your questions into the show, and early bird discounted tickets to our live shows. Subscribe for as little as $5 a month.